Welcome to another episode of Animator Interviews. My name is Evan Vernon. I'm a contributor at Animation for Adults, as well as Animation Nights New York, also known as ANNY. For those new to ANNY, we are a monthly screening event and yearly festival that celebrates the very best in animation talent. Our artists come from all across the globe, and many have had their work featured at Cannes, Annecy, and other prominent festivals. We receive hundreds of submissions each year, and each year we screen just 20 at our annual Best of Fest. Today we're joined by one of those 20. If you're a fan of independent animation, you've probably heard of Signe Baumane. The Latvian artist is a prominent name in the field. In the span of her prolific career, Signe has directed 15 shorts, released a feature film, toured over 300 festivals, secured exclusive grants and fellowships to fund her work, and collaborated with the likes of Bill Plimpton and other industry giants. Signe's animated short, Mother's Song, tells the story of Zelma, a young girl who wakes one night to find blood on her bedsheets. Her first menstrual cycle has begun, and she calls to her mother for help. Joined by a troupe of sirens, Zelma's mother proceeds to teach her daughter about love, marriage, and the rigid role of women in society. Today, Signe has kindly agreed to discuss Mother's Song and share a bit about her career. Today's episode is also public and open to audience questions. We will address all of those as they come in. Signe, thanks for being here. We want to talk about Mother's Song, but before we do that, take us on your journey a bit. What got you into animation? How did you enter the industry?
Yeah, that's like a long story how one starts animation. I was studying philosophy, and I never intended to be an artist, and I thought it was a horrible idea to be an artist. But I did draw and I did do all these things, but I just probably didn't think I was good enough, or I was not going to pursue career of an artist. And then I studied philosophy for 5 years, and at the end I was supposed to teach philosophy. I was supposed to be a philosophy professor, and it didn't really appeal to me. And I had to find a job or something very quickly, because in the country where I was from, you had to, after you graduated, you had to get a job immediately. And so I looked around, and a friend of mine said, I really like your doodles that you draw on the lectures of the philosophy, and I would like to see these doodles move. She said, I would like to see them to be animated. And I thought, okay, animation sounds much better than teaching philosophy. So so that's what happened. For me, the animation, what happened was that the focus that animation requires is just so amazing. Like you go in there in this other zone, and you forget the outside world and outside problems. And I don't know, I just fell in love with it. Probably I was not very good when I started out. I don't really find myself very talented or wonderful in many ways, but when you do something for a long time, for years, then I guess at some point I wouldn't say you become good, but you kind of get it.
Yeah.
And so that's what happened to me.
And you're definitely a person who gets it, Signe. For all those listening in, you're definitely underselling yourself. Your work's been critically celebrated by many different voices in the industry. So thank you so much for sharing. Before we talk about the film, I was wondering if you could tell us where your visual style came from a bit. It's very interesting. There's this almost kind of creative dissonance between the content of your work and the way it appears. It's very children's booky. I think you've actually done illustrations for children, but for Mother's Song in particular, that visual aesthetic is there, but the subject matter, the actual content, skews adult. So tell us a little bit about that. Where'd that style come from?
I have never, like as I said, I never studied art, and so my style has never been broken. Like when you go to art school, they kind of break you. They tell you this is good and this is not, and this
Yeah.
is the way you do it. But this is where you don't. I was never broken as an artist. So for me, my style is my like handwriting. It's like I write. How you write, and it's your particular style, and so that's just the way how I draw. It's the way how I write. It's kind of my voice, and it's untamed. And I mean, I developed it over the years, and I get more ambitious and more sophisticated. But I don't know. But with the visual approach, the visual, what interests me on how I organize the images, that I can say clearly was influenced by Eastern European poster tradition. There is a great tradition of posters, and there is one Lithuanian Polish illustrator, Stasis Idergavičius, that I would say influenced me quite a bit. Yeah, he's a very particular artist. And then, of course, Bill Plimpton was a big influence. And also, if you remember the MTV spots,
Yeah.
yeah, signal films, those are amazing. And I still, I mean, when I saw them for the first time, I just was like, I couldn't get enough of those. I was just jealous and envious, and I wanted to do something like that. So that's kind of my biggest, like in a broad strokes, my biggest influences in a visual style or visual approach, actually. But I see what you're saying is that style being childish. I think that my style in that regard is a little bit deceptive, because it's not exactly childish. It's simple. It's very obvious, not obvious. It's simple, but then there's a layer of adultness that is, that you have to look at it a little bit more to decode it. So, but yeah, but I would say I am still a 5-year-old girl trying to draw and communicate with the world in images, and also, how children draw and they show it to their parents, and did you like it? Do you like it? And then you want to have a reaction, and that's me and audience. I want when audience is happy, I'm just happy.
Yeah,
Yeah.
that's you said some beautiful things right there. Never forsake your inner child, right? When people say that, I feel like they're just alluding to the creativity, the lack of inhibition that children have. And you can see that in you, Signe, as an artist. Your work's so expressive. You definitely have that inner child.
You have to be in touch with it. I don't
Yeah.
know how else you can be creative or free or anything. At the same
Yeah.
time, of course, you have responsibilities of adult,
Yeah.
which is you have to finish your work. That's one
Yep.
responsibility a child doesn't have. A child impulsively can start something and drop it. And like for me, in the last 6 years, I've been working in this animated feature film, My Love Affair with Marriage. And like if I was just that 5-year-old girl, I would just dropped it long time ago, because it's just so difficult and
Yeah.
drawn out, and it's not exactly impulsive, and when yeah, so you have responsibilities. So but there's another person inside me. It's a 5-year-old girl, but the other one is 100-year-old lady, and so that is the wisdom and endurance and patience that you have to have, so as an animator. So these I'm living between the two extremes of a child and an old woman.
Well said. Well said, Signe. I do see that we have one question in the chat. We're going to get to that in just a moment here. But before we do, give us some background on Mother's Song, the film that we're screening, featuring right now as part of the festival. I understand this is part of a larger body of work, this feature film, My Love Affair with Marriage. But where did the idea for Mother's Song in particular come from?
Yes, so a mother song is a part of a feature film, My Love Affair is Marriage. As I mentioned to you before, when you start a big project like that and you don't go to film festivals, people kind of forget you. You know, they're like, who is this person? Where is they coming from? Because 6 years is a long, long time. You know, like my allegory for an artist is like we like dogs. We have to mark our territory. We have to piss on the corners. And then when you skip like a day, you know, some other dogs will piss on the corners, and so people would not know that it's your territory. So in some ways, you have to mark your territory, and so this mother song was seemed self-sufficient. We have 23 songs in the film, but this particular song seemed self-sufficient. It explained within itself what it was. But you're right. There's a certain part of the song that it's inspired by real events and conversations with my mother and like other women that I know who had the conversations with their mothers. What does it mean when you start menstruating? You know, like what does that monthly bleeding means? And for the first time, it's for me personally, I was 13. It was very scary, and I wanted my mother to give me consolation, you know, and advice. And I wouldn't say she had exactly the same kind of brutal conversation with me, but in some ways she didn't assure me. You know, actually her conversations with her about that got kind of more and more scary. You know, and the thing was that now you're gonna be a woman and you are going to have you know, men are going to surround you and you have to make the right choice and stay pure and virginal until you marry. And so that was kind of the inspiration. The other musical inspiration, though, when I wrote the lyrics for the song and I asked composer Christiansen Signe to write the song, the music for it, he said, well, in what direction would you like to go for this song? And I was like, well, the song is absurd, you know, the message is absurd. And I said, I would like to have something like Oompa Loompa from Chocolate Factory, you know, you know, I was like, Oompa Loompa. And then Christian kind of looked around and he said, oh, I see what you mean. And so he did something entirely different, but the idea of that absurdity, I think he preserved it really well, the humor and absurdity of the piece. So
yeah, absurd humor. This has been said about you before, but you know, critics have kind of praised your work for the way that it addresses difficult subject matter. If you smooth things over with comedy, even if it's dark comedy, it becomes easier to digest. You know, that issue is now more accessible to the viewer in some way. We do have a question in the chat from Jack. I think this is about the visual style of the film in particular. Jack writes, you and your team constructed that room in Mother Song that the film takes place in real life, which looks amazing. What was the idea that led to that over a drawn background?
So yes, so the technique in the film that we used was to do three-dimensional backgrounds and build the room, Zelma's, the main character's room. And so then we photograph it, and then I animate on top, and then we color the drawings in Photoshop, and then composite them in After Effects. And so that is how it's done. And most of the My Love Affair is Marriage is done in this way, but certainly Mother Song, except there are like few clips of the fantasy scenes. The Zelma processes in her particular way what Mother is saying, and those are just like flat drawings. And so that's how I separate the real world from the fantasy. So the idea to do three-dimensional sets, I think that's the question. Yeah, it came when I many years ago, I was some fashion designer in Italy saw my work and he said, I want you to do mural for me. And I did this mural. And then he said, oh, now I want you to can you do like paper-mâché sculptures and I pay you, right? And I'm like, okay, I do anything, you know, for money. You can do a lot of things. And I was like, and he said, you can do anything you want. But I was like, it was my first time. I never done paper mache, but I was like, oh, let me try. And I turned out to be so good. I mean, meaning I not good, but like I created these sculptures about of my size, they're huge, and they're paper mache, and it was amazing to create them. And I thought it would be great to bring this kind of three-dimensional world into my animation work. But as you know, if you animate paper mache, it breaks, and it's just not possible to animate it. And I was like, well, how can I make it work? How can I make it adjustable to my animation work? Then I kind of had this idea about backgrounds. If I made these backgrounds and I photographed them, then I put little characters on top. And that was, I did that technique for my first animated feature film, Rocks in My Pockets. Mm-hmm. And for the second film, we developed the scene, the technique much more. My partner, Sturgis, whom you met just before the panel, he built all the sets, from wood, from a scrap wood he finds in a Brooklyn trash cans, and then my assistants, art assistants, Yasemin and Sophia, they were painting them, and so it was a very elaborate process and very elaborate sets in comparison to my previous feature film. But yeah, I would like to make I was kind of struggling. I was like 10 years ago. I was like, I would like to make a feature film live action as actors, but I don't know anything about actors or shooting live action. And in this way, when I brought in three-dimensional sets, suddenly I am working with camera, because I really like taking pictures and camera work. I really like it. And so now I'm working as a camera woman, and that kind of like, it's not live action, it's not stop motion, it's not exactly traditional animation, it's kind of a blend of several techniques. Yeah.
It's Signe Baumane animation.
No, I did not invent anything. It's really, I think that this technique is as old as the world. I was told that even Disney tried in a long time ago, tried to do this technique. But of course, before digital, you couldn't do it. So they were doing in a way how it didn't look really so great, but Sure. Yeah, the combination of 3D backgrounds and flat and 2D characters has been done before. I just made adjustments and I made it my own, but to serve my style, my purposes.
Yeah. Well, again, your modesty betrays you, Signe, but I think there's a lot to be said about your skill and just how interdisciplinary you are. I think we have let's see if this is a question. It might be a comment also from Jack. Jack, thank you for your thoughtfulness. Appreciate it. Jack writes, the result is spectacular. Thank you for telling us about it. I second that, Jack. I had another question. What was the influence behind the half bird design of the chorus singers? That's interesting. Yeah. So the kind of like harpy characters. Go ahead. Signe.
Yeah. No, those are they have name actually, which you never find out, right? But in interior, what you call it, in insiders kind of insight, right? They're called Mythology Sirens, and sirens, and they're shape-shifting characters, and so when Zelma is young, they are kind of younger, smaller. And then when I grow bigger, she grows bigger, and then they could be like frightening, and they could be like funny, and they could be sad or mourning. They kind of exaggerate kind of Zelma's perception of what she's supposed to do, and so I don't know, in a whole film they change as I said, we have 23 songs with the Mythology Sirens, and every time when they appear, they are slightly different, or like heavy different. They're magnificently different from what they were before. So yeah, they're these shape-shifting characters, and they represent these societal expectations, like societal norms, like what the world expects for a girl to be or do, and in this case the mother is the main singer, the lead singer, or she doesn't sing, she just like says these truths, but the sirens support her, they're like, yeah, they're harmonizing in the background. So and they also accent in this song, they accent the absurdity, in the other songs in the rest of the film and the feature film, they can get very frightening and threatening. When Zelma loses her virginity, there is like a whole fight going on. So
Yeah.
yeah.
Yeah, it's fascinating that a thoughtful question, thoughtful answer, first of all. It's fascinating that you're able to kind of take these different, I guess, illusions, from myth or something, and then kind of repurpose them and integrate them into your own work.
Oh yeah, but that's animation.
Yeah.
The possibilities are endless.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Well said, Signe. Well, I know we're running a bit close on time here, so I think we are going to have to start bringing things to a close. I've got one last question for you, Signe. So a lot of your work seems to underscore important social issues in one way or another. For those who've seen Rocks in My Pockets, it deals very heavily with mental health and a mental illness. And Mother Song deals with gender. So with that in mind, Signe, and I hope I'm not leading the question, you've already established a very strong artistic legacy, but how would you like to be remembered as an artist? How would you like people to remember your work? What would you like them to learn from you?
I don't know if I want people to learn anything from me. I want, like, when I make films, I aspire to provoke people, like kind of poke a little bit at the comfort, like wake them up and kind of slap them around and say, hey, there's this question, what do you think about it? And I can't give answers. I mean, I'm not answer creating machine. Answers are done by activists and politicians, maybe, by people who are much smarter than me. I am just an artist, I see something, say something. I'm an artist, and my job is to make people think. I also think that like really what upsets me in the world is like people sink into this kind of passivity, like complacency, how we do as majority does, yeah, sure, like wearing masks, yeah, do as majority does. I mean, I wear a mask every time, but I didn't just complacently went with majority. I said, why and where and how, and then I put it one and one together, and I'm wearing a mask. You know what I mean? It's like
Yeah,
or
sure.
or in a human existence. I want to I don't know, it's I want people to have critical thinking,
Mm.
like employ
Yeah.
critical thinking, be able to ask questions, and I mean, and not just like stupidly saying, like, or doubting vaccines or something like that, but just being more critical of information. And I don't know how I mean, obviously, I believe that when the moment I disappear on from face of earth, people will forget me because there will be no one pissing on the corners, on my corners, right? That's like nobody's gonna claim the space that I'm taking. Um, but I'm creating work for people today, now,
Yeah.
because there might be no tomorrow, in some ways, not for me or for anybody. I mean, I'm not going to be so pessimistic. Yeah, there is going to be a long life on earth for everybody. But I don't know. I'm too young to say, oh, I want to be remembered by this or by that.
Sure. Well, it's a difficult question to ask as an artist, but you said something very beautiful right there, saying, I'm not going to give you the answers. I want people to think. By doing that, you're allowing the art to kind of become its own organism. And now it belongs to all of us, and we have to interpret it for ourselves. The same goes for poetry. Your work, in many ways, is like poetry. And it's been a real honor and thrill for us to show it here at ANNY Best of Fest. So thank you so much for just giving us a sample of your talent. We wish you all the best in the future, Signe, and look forward to seeing what you do later down the line. That's all I've got. Best of luck to you in the future, Signe. You are incredibly gifted. I hope we see you next year.
Thank you. Thank you so much. It was really a great honor to be part of the best of the Annies. That just like really great honor. Thank you.
No, thank you, Signe. And we're getting a lot of thank yous from the gallery too. So you take care. Talk
Okay.
soon.
Thank you. Bye.